I miss it.
I missed it.
I mean, I've been all screwed up this week. I thought we had a meeting last night.
I thought I sent it out, but,
Because I looked for it, and I went in.
We are live.
okay. Good evening, February 2nd, 2016 Finance Committee, otherwise known, I understand, as the Fun Committee, so we like that. Funcom. The
Fincom.
Funcom, that's right, Funcom.
This is Fincom Light.
Tonight, the focus is 2017 budget and capital plan, specifically the capital plan. Our Assistant Town Administrator has done some serious work and put together a lot of numbers and analysis for us, so she's going to share that with us and let us have some discussion and then see where we go with that. But done some really good work, so I'm anxious to share it with everybody. So that's it, pretty much it for tonight in general. And we might also talk about, well, it's part of the budget anyway, so.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Basically, what I'm trying to do is drill down probably 50 different spreadsheet combinations into something that's reasonably understood so that you can kind of make some recommendations going forward on the use of free cash, our reserves, budget projections going forward, new debt that may or may not be coming on, whether that debt should be inside the levy or outside the levy. So with that caveat, I will kind of go through the free cash analysis first, because that's a critical part of it, and it's a topic. That's what this works.
Thanks.
Okay, let me make this a little bigger, but I will email these out to you after. I just didn't email them before because I want to be able to change them based on our conversation this evening, and make them more relevant with what we're recommending. So the free cash this fiscal year was certified at just shy of $7.8 million. So you can see it's the amount here, the 7.799. And, I know there's been a lot of discussion that that's a high number, and, how did it get to that point? And I just want to remind everybody that this has been a 10-year accumulation of free cash. And part of that incorporates our fiscal policies of not budgeting 10% of our new revenues and not spending any debt service that would be retired on operating budget. So this helps replenish the free cash that we use. It also, in the past fiscal years, has built up additional reserves. So,
Well, plus this year, you had some capital that came off, right? So,
right, we did like a scrub this fiscal year, last fiscal year, closed out any old articles that were not being used, where the projects were determined to be complete. That any additional money from that goes to free cash. We also had some spikes in revenue for the projects that were going on with the building department. So we had a lot of building permits issued. That's not a sustainable revenue source, so instead of getting $300,000 in building permits, we got $750,000. It's going to go back down once the building, booms, goes away. So you don't want to program that into operating. So basically, we're at the 7.799 right now. What we've done in previous fiscal years, in accordance with the policies, is we appropriate money to stabilization, which we need to keep at least a 5% balance of our operating budget in the stabilization fund. So for fiscal 17, that number would be just shy of $70,000. The next thing that we do is we go through and earmark up to 2.5% of the operating budget for capital. So that number would be $1,132,000 for fiscal 2017. Now, in all previous fiscal years, we've stopped here and not appropriated funds beyond that. You don't have to. It's a decision of the board. But in this fiscal year, we're looking like we need to augment our reserves for future projects that are coming on. So what we did is, as recommended in the financial policies meeting, in these sequential orders, up to 20% of the excess balance can go into OPEB first. That would be $639,000. That addresses the $35+ million unfunded liability that we have for OPEB. So we keep picking away at that as much as we can. Once you do that, then you can take up to 60% of the excess balances and allocate them among the either stabilization, debt exclusion stabilization, or capital stabilization. For this, I just split it in half, because it's about $1.9 million that would be available, and divided it between the two accounts. It could all go into one, it doesn't really matter, I just parked it there. So if we did that, then the free cash balance would be drawn down to $4,038,000. If, I'm going to kind of scroll over, maybe I can do this, hang on.
Are there questions on that before we get further into this? I see Greg's kind of got a wrinkled look on his face, I want to make sure. Well, I mean, you haven't seen this for a while.
I understand it. It's
Okay,
just,
that's all right, it's a lot of numbers, okay.
Okay. So you can see over here on the other end of the spreadsheet that the calculations are being footed here. So 2.5% is the $1,132,000, 60% is $1,009,000. So these two figures here equal the $1,009,000, okay? 20% is $639,000, so that's where I got the $639,000 for OPEB. So everything is being calculated automatically for us. But this would, by funding it in this way, it would draw down the free cash to $4,038,000. So, of that, we could continue to appropriate down another $639,000 to additional capital. This could be used for any additional capital. It could be used, it could also be put aside in capital stabilization, but it would be available for additional capital because we've met our benchmark of the 7.5% in free cash, which would be this $3,398,250. So as long as we don't go below that, we can continue to fund additional capital. Doesn't mean you have to, but you can. If you don't, then the free cash will just roll. Any excess free cash will roll until the next fiscal year and be replenished. So in this example, and I know this is a lot of spreadsheet data and it's not particularly friendly, but I rolled it out for the next 3 years based on the budget projection, so 17, 18, and 19. If we continue doing this, assuming that the free cash is regenerated in the amount of about $1.5 million a year, which is pretty reasonable, and we continue to fund the stabilization accounts at the amount that we need and capital, these amounts here, not OPEB, I'm sorry, these amounts here, along with this and this, could be used to fund a capital project or finance debt or reduce debt. That totals about $3 million over the next few years. So it's a significant reduction in any particular debt or any particular capital project. What you could do is you could say we had the fire station coming on at $6.6 million. You could apply $3 million to that debt service and only place $3.6 million. You could also place the full $6.6 million and then just use payments out of here to pay down the debt service. I wouldn't recommend that only because then you're incurring the interest costs. The interest cost, if you reduce the debt by the $3 million, is about $1.5 million in savings over the life of the loan.
hey, Bonnie, I have a question.
Sure.
OPEB, I mean, that's a big number in fiscal year 17.
Yeah.
Drops dramatically in 18 and 19. Are there any concerns long-term as far as funding that?
This is in addition to what we appropriate in the operating budget.
It's an addition,
Yes.
okay.
So, I would love to see OPEB funded, to the maximum that we could every year, but we're not sacrificing anything that we're appropriating in the operating budget for this.
Okay, all right, that makes sense, thank you.
So, that being said, this is,
Okay, I just want to, well, no, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
We had done some other projections based on the policy and so on, and it came out, then in 18 and 19, there wasn't enough really rolling free cash to do everything else we needed to do, so.
Yeah, you can see in fiscal 18, there's no amount here because this here is a little bit less than the 7.5%. Not much, but a few $1,000s less than the 7.5%, which means we can't proceed down to here. In this fiscal year, it's more, so we can proceed to do some funding. And you can see the ending free cash balances for each fiscal year. So it'll keep
doesn't-
free cash hovering around $3.5 million.
those are just additional projects. If you look up there, you can see we're spending over $1 million each year
Right,
in capital
in capital.
projects.
Right.
B is a higher priority, so that gets funded first before anything.
Did you present this list of options to the selectmen yet?
No. Nope.
Okay. 'Cause, I mean, I think it's very clear in how it's put forward, and it makes me feel very comfortable about the process we've adopted. But that process provides a framework for prioritization, and, I think it ought to be spelled out to them. Here's your options,
Right.
and given the evidence in front of you, what's your proposal?
Absolutely.
I mean, they could do anything, or they could recommend anything from the next 3, 4, 5 years, pay down the debt that's outside 2.5 with this money, and actually deliver a tax cut for those 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I'll accept that as a for instance. I think the danger with that within the operating budget is the space that debt fills in the budget is nice because there's no growth factor involved with it, right? So it allows everything else to grow at a little bit higher number. But yeah, but
But you're not, but that, that was one thing that Mr. Avellas was
Yeah.
talking about, right?
No, I hear
So
you.
that's one option.
Some of that debt is bonds, though, right? It's not as simple as going to the bank and paying
No,
off
but
your
you can
loan
pay-
quickly,
no, but
right?
you can pay it.
Yeah, just-
Instead of paying it outright, instead of taking money out of all the taxpayers' pockets to.
No, I understand
pay it,
that.
They could pay it from their savings account. That's one, sort of far left.
Yeah.
The other side could be, as Bonnie mentioned, you just add up the years, and when we get around to having to bond the fire station, you pay for half it in cash, or some
It's less
percentage of
less
it
of
in
an
cash.
impact on the taxpayers.
And then you only borrow half, or 2/3, or 1/3. is-
Yeah, knowing we got
Okay.
the fire station for.
She's got more, so
Okay.
if you
Well,
want.
I'll just finish your point, 'cause I want to find
No,
going.
no, that's
But-
okay, it's going to
Yeah,
go into
I
your
mean,
point.
the
so-
fire station's a certainty, and something with the library is a great likelihood. And then in my mind, the other two things that come quickly to mind is we've never given enough to roads as we wanted to, and building maintenance, which you guys have.
Harp on it.
Yeah,
Oh,
and this is a great time to fill, rather than buy something shiny new, which,
Right.
can wait a year or two, yeah.
No, and again, that was sort of the next role
Yep.
was,
Sorry, keep showing me my back.
5 or 6
I like
years
looking at the
ago.
back of your head.
Still get hair on it.
We had the road study done, maybe 8 years ago, we had the road study done, and we had a score, the town-wide score of about 74 of 100. And we've been spending $1 million a year, $1 million-ish a
Yeah.
year on roads, and now we're down to a 65 score. How much longer do we not try to turn that tide a little bit? So I think, this may be a good opportunity to spend more there, to support the infrastructure a little bit. So, I think the selectmen have got a Chinese menu that they need to look at and come back and say, okay, well, what do they want to do? But I think, they owe it to the taxpayers to look at it across the board, and not just bring the next big project down the line and say, we can do this project. But you got the next big project, and then you got the library project, and then you got the field, and then you got
Land
whatever
and
the, the
everything,
next
who knows?
Cooper Farm. and
The likelihood of us having a year like this in the next, who knows when, is, let's just do it wisely.
Absolutely.
So that's the bottom line here, it really is.
Well,
Okay.
and I think it's important, you weren't here for the very beginning, but to remember that this free cash amount is an accumulation of 10 years.
Right.
So by appropriating it, it's not, it's not going to be there next year.
Right, it's a
And
windfall.
It's a good thing. But,
And it may not be the right thing to do to spend a big chunk of it on the project of the day, but, try to, maybe it is, try to get the roads sort of a step function, and then we keep inching back towards where I think we need to be with them. And I think the study, I don't know if anybody saw it up, but the study that was presented, that was actually pretty good information in there.
Yeah.
And it looks like a pretty decent tool to.
Which study is this?
Well,
The
it-
street scan?
Oh, the new one, yeah.
Selectmen paid for a study, it's technology developed out of Northeastern University. And went around and looked at all the roads, put conditions, and put the roads in categories, ones that really almost need to be re-engineered, ones that can be ground and paved and that kind of stuff.
And it was nice because they put in the roads that just needed, like, short money repairs that would extend the life significantly, so that those roads never really hit our list before,
Right.
which was, it's great.
Well, anybody with a strong horse can still make it up New State Road. So. That's supposed to be done by this spring.
Well, you've cut the traffic on the new estate, haven't
Oh,
you?
believe me, I understand both sides of that sword. We don't always look forward to next summer when that's a,
That's right, exactly.
That'll be the new
Speed bumps there
drag.
are helpful, right.
Speed bumps, Paul.
Speed bumps, absolutely.
That's what happened with Bruce Street.
Absolutely, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait till Russell Street gets done, boy. That'll be the drag strip.
Okay, so I'm going to go over to debt at this point. So I want to kind of preface how the thought process from a few years ago in discussing the fire station. The thought generally was that we wanted to, whether you want to talk about voting it outside or inside, as far as the debt exclusion, the goal was to try and pay for it inside the levy with retired debt. So the reason that it got dropped into fiscal '20 was because when we started this discussion in '14, my inside debt service figure is this $908,000. It was going to drop down significantly in fiscal '20 to $150,000. Okay? So we could say, well, we can squeeze in a fire station or, some sort of
Some big
project.
project, right?
Now, what we had been doing up until that point with this retired debt is adding it to available funds for capital, so that it doesn't go into the operating budget. So we had been doing that very carefully.
as we should.
So, I have the outside debt here. You could see where we were dropping in payments based on some temporary borrowings for a fire station, and then permanent placement in fiscal '20, so that our debt amount would go back up to $810,000 annually inside the levy. So, easy peasy. I have the outside debt here just as a reference point, but we were not planning on funding it outside the levy, but it's just here as a reference, as our total debt. In the discussion, we also, I added in a column here for our capital expenditures and how we were funding those over the same period. So accumulated retired debt was one portion of it, and free cash. So we started in fiscal '14 with about $1.4 million in capital that we were spending. And you can see it goes up, by either debt that's retiring or other anomalies like one-time revenues or something like that would come into play. And in fiscal '19, the total available for capital would be $2.6 million. That would drop down in fiscal '20 to $2 million because we would be placing the fire service debt at that $660,000 amount. Okay, so that's how we're funding it inside the levy. So it was at the expense of the capital plan, but that was the discussion that was had back then. So this is what our total debt would look like with that program. So this is the inside debt, and you can see it's almost fully retired and then gets fully retired in fiscal '24. That's when the last bit of the high school debt comes off. This is when the Shaker Lane debt gets retired. And that's when we drop in the full impact of the fire station up here. The other target was keeping the debt service payment total, inside and out, at about $2.5 million annually, because at the $3 million that was, in excess of $3 million back in fiscal '12, we had a lot of angst. So this would accomplish that.
Although that $3 million in the out years is $3 million of a much bigger budget pie, too, because it
No,
grows.
it's $3 million of a smaller budget. We were paying $4 million a year.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, $3 million in FY14 is different than $3 million of a FY23 budget.
Correct. Correct. But in the planning, it was discussed, we really don't want to go past that 2
No, no,
million.
I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying,
Percentage-wise.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's-
as a percentage, it is.
On a percentage basis, I think it would be okay, but on a practical basis, it's not you have control over whether you spend capital or
Sure.
not. So much of the other expenses are just personnel related.
yeah.
You look
Yeah,
at
I mean,
the-
I did picture there, I mean, that shows that even at dropping the fire station in, we're going, down,
Right.
not just percentage, but real dollars, too.
Now, this is the full fire station,
Right.
full $6.6 million debt placement. With this same plan, this would be the capital spending available, for the same number of years. So you can see it creeps up in 14, up to 19, at the high point of just over 2.5 million, and then drops down as that fire station debt takes a piece of that pie. And then it slowly recovers through fiscal '24. So,
How long are we going to be on the hook for the fire station?
20 years.
20 years.
20 years?
Why should our capital be growing at that rate? Just, capital's, I mean, we know what it is, it's rolling stock and,
Just saying it's available for
oh,
capital.
yeah, no, I know.
So
but-
it's growing because of the debt service coming off. That's how this is calculated.
Yeah, so
It
that-
could be appropriated to
It's
reserves.
a zero-sum thing, whatever isn't going into debt, you're putting here instead, right, okay, all right, as long as that's understood, so it's not like,
That's why, when we were chatting about it,
Yeah.
the idea came, well, for the next 3 years, why not sock a bunch away
yeah,
and not bond $6 or $7 million for a fire station, bond 3 or 4?
I
And
mean,
that's
not to
save a
retouch an
bundle.
ancient subject, but that was kind of what made the whole high school thing work, was the fact that we were salting away a lot of money in advance. It created both space in the budget and money in the bank.
Right, the only thing that potentially throws a monkey wrench in is if inflation takes off.
Sure.
Then all hell breaks loose,
Yeah.
because that's what happened before.
Right.
And if that happens, all bets are off.
Not with the way the Fed is going negative interests.
But it's important in this, as we do this, so when we're looking at it, to make sure that there is still sufficient capital, so we keep the assets that we have.
Right.
To make sure we keep them maintained, so we don't get back into the cycle again of needing to replace things. So that, it's really important that we balance
Yeah,
those two.
but I don't think
know,
we're-
I think we've got
We
it.
got a lot of shiny
case
stuff
there's
out there,
just
parking
I
lots
know.
and garages.
And 2 million available.
Buildings and so on, but yeah.
Yep.
But we should at least model the library.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
We should at least.
hold that thought.
Sure.
We got it.
Hold that
and
thought.
model whatever, whatever for conservation, whatever, because we can talk ourselves into a good situation, and then all of a sudden, a big project comes up, and we get jammed.
Throws the hand grenade in the...
And this amount, the 2.6, the high point, represents about 5% of the operating budget. So, it just as a reference point, it's about 5% of total operating expenditures being spent on capital. So, if we go instead and look at our debt, and instead of placing the full, 6.6 million in debt for the fire station, we apply the 3 million that we have in savings, or some figure. But for this exercise, I just took the 3 million that we had accumulated in free cash allocations, and applied it on the debt. So the debt service payments go down. It means in fiscal 14, we started at that high, or the planning year, of 908,000. In fiscal 20, we're down to 150, but with the new debt, we're at 510 instead of the 810 that we had planned for at full debt issue. The other thing that does is frees up more available for capital, because I'm not taking as much out in the accumulated debt, and this went down to 760,000, it's now over $1 million still. So instead of dropping to 2 million, it drops to 2.3 from this 2.6. Doing that, the chart, why is this not, here we go. This is the chart with only half of the fire station debt essentially placed. So you can see we're well below that 2.5 million threshold that we had identified back in 2014. And again, it drops off pretty quickly. as we make the payments.
And you just have programmed in the $1.5 to $2 million worth of capital a year.
Yep.
And, okay, so it says, if you look at the capital schedule, it says next year, virtually all of the capital is going to be spent on the ladder truck.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
If-
I mean, if you balance just the overall number against the
Requests or items.
list that's out there.
Yep.
And you don't have $1 million for a field in there. And you don't
Yep.
have several $1 million for library in here.
No.
Okay. So the tailing off is
Yep.
likely not to be quite that steep unless we don't do some projects that people really seem to want to do. But just be careful of that.
So this is the capital plan, or what's available for capital, with the reduced debt that is placed. So you can see there still is a drop in fiscal '20, but it's not as significant as it was here, with a full $6.5 million placed. And it recovers pretty quickly to its previous level of just over $2.5 million. Excuse me.
Which again, is just capacity, it's not.
It's capacity.
There's nothing even specifically earmarked for any of that, right?
Nope. So taking it one step further, I wanted to add another item and say, well, you know, if we did that, we know that we have a lot of discussion with projects that might come on. It could be a library, it could be, you know, any combination of a number of things.
Fields, open space,
Right.
you name it. Yeah.
So what I did is I dropped in an amount that would support a debt service payment of $4 million, to see what that would look like going forward. I didn't earmark whether that would be inside debt or outside debt, but I wanted to see what that would do to our total obligation in debt. And even at $4 million, it's pretty close to being something that it's close to that $2.5 million threshold. It's a little over in fiscal '19, but it seems to drop
When
down.
you say 4 million, that's a 4 million additional borrowings of some sort, inside or outside the levy limit, above and beyond those which we've already programmed for.
Right.
All right, well, that kind of
So
addresses,
that's sort of the library.
The outside,
loan,
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and I don't know what it is, but it's just something to look at.
Yeah.
I thought
No,
it'd be worthwhile
that's great.
looking at that and saying, you know, if you really swallowed hard and the dam didn't break, you might be okay.
yeah.
And again, there's no assumptions on what that debt might be for. It's just additional capacity to borrow.
But that says you're not spending more money on roads. You're not spending more money on maintenance than we're spending now. In at least a couple of years, with what Bonnie has programmed in there, you won't spend very much at all on maintenance because the fire truck's going to eat up a big chunk of it unless some of it goes outside. Or the field at $1 million plus is another. So, you know, there's a couple of big chunks there that still aren't plugged in here. So you have to be a little.
Well, the additional 4 million doesn't accommodate some of those things, but you could still do some of those things with the amount prior to that additional 4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So it's not like an
But-
either
well,
or
but in
necessarily.
here, I think like 3-ish million was, I think you said like 3-ish million was going against the fire station.
Correct.
And that's the 3 million that you
Right.
could do other things up front with.
So if you took-
So you either do that with it, or you go against the fire station. So for this analysis, it's already used.
Yes.
On
So
the
it-
debt piece, but there's still a capital piece,
You're
right?
still allocating about $1 million a year in capital.
Just $1 million, okay, all right. And there's not a, if this is taking all the excess potential and putting it into debt, and that leaves the $1 million a year in capital without a growth factor?
It's $1 million, I'm sorry, it's $1 million inside the levy and about $1 million from free cash. So it's
Okay,
$2 million a
so-
year total.
And there's no growth factor figured in, that's about what we're doing now anyway?
It does
does
have,
grow
yeah,
somewhat,
it does
okay.
have an increase on it based
All right.
on the debt service as it
All right,
retires.
so
pump it through the,
No, I don't know, it sounds like healthy in all directions, so something's bound to
It's all
screw up.
predicated on excess.
Something's going to happen. It sounds too good to be true.
If it sounds too good to be true.
Let's all go home, everything's well.
but just, again,
I've seen this movie.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
to clarify, I mean, if the fire station debt were paid down by an amount less than the 3 million, then you're gonna push this up over,
Yeah.
you know, that
Exactly.
threshold for pain, that was
Right, so.
kind of identified
so
before, and maybe that needs to be looked
That
at.
limits, the idea of maybe putting a little more in roads in the short term, or a little more into maintenance on the short term, or whatever. So
Yeah, there's a cap on everything,
Yeah,
but, you know.
you're sort of in that box, so if nothing really breaks, then we might be okay, but if it breaks, then.
As long as we don't go crazy and spend it on operating. Everything else is
Right.
almost recoverable, you can make a mistake in one direction or other and recover from it, but there's no going home from
Yep.
that.
Right, no, absolutely.
But I think that what impressed me the most of this is how well in this community the capital plan has been managed over the last 10 years. It's like, I go to meetings with other communities and they're not near this level of, carefully retiring debt gets, squirreled away here and,
And there we were, the only capital that we did was capital exclusions to buy
right.
a dump truck and we all remember what that was like.
Well, I hope people continue to remember, so we keep sticking to that and doing it right, because it does work very well, it makes perfect sense, and it works well, and
Wonderful.
it's just the right way to do it anyway, we all know that. You can put one-time money to people, it just doesn't.
But again, I think, to me, a big question for the selectmen is, what do they want to do with roads? If they're.
Or any of those other variables, but I agree, that would be a priority of
If they're
mine.
comfortable with the 65 rating, if I was living on some of those red roads on the map, I wouldn't be real happy.
Well, even this year, I mean, we keep hearing about turf fields, but nobody seems to know anything, so I don't know whether that's going forward, it's got to be on the warrant or not, but we need to know pretty soon.
And the warrant closes on March 18th. So, and there's only 3 selectmen's meetings, I think, before that, so.
There's enough of an educational curve involved in getting the public behind it that I would,
Well, that's what I would
I
think,
frankly
too.
think if it's gonna pop up this spring without, any, it hasn't been really discussed, other than Park and Rec did a good job of putting a placeholder in, at least somebody stepped up and,
Did some- right.
and took some ownership of it, but it's really not their baby either. So if it's gonna happen, probably not for this spring, right? I mean, is somebody gonna
Seemed
dump
to
it all?
me, that's what I mean, if they just come out the last minute again, it's not the same boat, because at least we've talked about it, but in terms of the public, you haven't done anything and
Right.
gotten the word out and answered the questions and all the long-term stuff. It's not only just buying them, it's the maintenance and the replacement and health and all those, there's a lot of discussions
The
that need to
selectmen ought
happen.
to appoint
Right.
a group that has somebody from here, somebody from Park and Rec, somebody from the
Schools,
schools,
right.
and some of the citizens to go off and, formally study the options. To date, most of the study's been done by some of the citizens on their own, right? I mean, isn't that,
There is a citizen that was
Right.
charged with doing the
Right.
feasibility study. I can ask on the progress
that's
of
right,
that.
they had somebody
They
who
did
was
have
an
who
expert who
offered
kind of
was gonna do
volunteered
it.
his
Yeah,
time, right?
I can ask,
But-
when the anticipated,
As long as it's,
Well,
I think that's done,
okay, I don't think the selectmen have seen
you
it.
have some inside knowledge on this?
of course.
You have something you can share on where we are with this, really?
So, only to the extent that, in talking to Mike Lynn, he said that he had talked about this spring, having it at town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Like, is this in the last week you've had this discussion, last month,
this
or?
was Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, again, I don't want to put words into Mike's mouth, because we were this came up because I threw out the idea to Alicia Day of privately funding the maintenance of the football and the lacrosse fields. Because I'm president of Littleton Youth Football, and Alicia and I sat down, we looked at the budget and looked at what we're paying for field maintenance, which is around $5,000 or $6,000, maybe $7,000. And we get, what we get for that $7,000 is we get to play on dirt and rocks. And I said, in other towns like Groton, where, like Cow Pond is publicly owned, it's a, town-owned field, but the citizens maintain it. And it looks like a golf course. And so I was talking to Mike Lynn Sunday, because our sons play basketball together, and I said, look, we can fundraise and raise a lot of money so that we can get those fields in working condition and maintain them and do the right maintenance programs so that they're not dying off every year and then having to.
But if there's going to be a proposal, it needs to get out, so it can be kicked around soon.
Well, so this idea came up literally last Thursday on the maintenance of the fields.
Yeah.
And then Mike made the comment, well, he was going to talk to Sean because apparently that study had been done, or, whatever Sean was going to do has been done.
He's
But
what, the
my-
turf expert or something or other?
Yeah, he's the engineer who's going to do the cost. I'm not even sure exactly what the study is. But in any event, Mike said, well, if we can get, we should be, we're moving forward with getting that turf field, and hopefully that will alleviate some of the issues. And I said, well, that, my concern is the now versus, down the road and hoping that we have turf. But we have to we have to do something today about these fields. And if we can privately do it and, and take that out of the town's hands, because the town has other things that they need to worry about in terms of maintenance, and, get the citizens involved, and, we can do a really good job maintaining those fields.
Well, that's an important piece, but so is the basic field itself. What's it going to cost, and, what's the proposal?
Talking about maintaining turf fields or maintaining the current fields?
The current fields.
That's what he's
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about, different things.
not the turf.
But
So-
I thought you said the turf, though, Mike's intention was, didn't,
Well, what Mike said was, he said, that sounds good, and, assuming we get turf fields in a year or so.
oh, all right. I thought,
Then, we don't, because I mentioned alumni field, I said, part of this would be, we would do the, a real program on alumni field. We wouldn't touch it, we wouldn't, grade it or any of that stuff, but we would maintain it as if it's our own lawn, And we'd fund, landscaping companies to come in and overseed it and do all the right programs to make sure we have good grass on there, and we'd pay the water bills, we'd make sure the town is watering it appropriately and paying those bills. And,
When Mike came in, I think he mentioned that lacrosse is really
He did.
the beast, that the men's lacrosse anyway, is really the beast that chews up the fields. I mean, they just dig up the field.
kills it, absolutely.
So, do we find someplace else for them to play? Do we,
Well, one of the issues
I
is,
don't know, what's the,
it's not, the problem is, it's a combination of the repetitiveness of that game,
right?
but it's also the lack of maintenance on the current field. So it's kind of it's the perfect storm. You're fertilizing a field that is more or less crabgrass twice a year,
Yeah.
instead of doing a 4-step program with other, other applications during the course of the summer and the spring.
never gets a chance to recover, right? That's-
So what happens is, it becomes crabgrass, and then you've got all that repetitive motion. Crabgrass doesn't have deep roots, so that gets all pulled up, and now you're dealing with dirt, as opposed to if you had a really good foundation of grass with deep roots. And again, this is all, I've learned more in the last year.
You sound real good, Tom.
And so, you can have that repetitive motion, like Cow Pond, they play, lacrosse on those fields. They play.
And it's
youth-
real grass, and it's real grass.
And it's real grass, and it's plush. I mean,
You need like a season of nobody using it to get this in place? I mean, is that kind of a...
Well, well, it's funny, because I suggested to Kevin Hunt, because I talked to Kevin yesterday, and I said, we could even bring in sod and completely sod, like the middle school field. And he said, the problem with sod is the roots don't get way down deep like it does with seed.
Right.
The problem with seed is it takes months
Right.
for it to take hold, and we
Right.
don't have,
Right.
we have like
Right.
a month to
Yeah.
get a field ready for
Maybe.
use. So
Tough one.
it's a tough one, but,
Well, no football next year. Just kidding, just kidding.
It's not a riot around here.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what I'd do with it.
Well, that all sounds promising, especially since
FinCom meetings.
you've got a working model I assume you've got contacts in Groton, you're going to try to follow what they're doing?
Yeah, well, exactly, so,
But it doesn't sound like any of that's going to require any action from the town this spring, right? No, that's two separate subjects, right?
yeah, two
Okay.
separate things. But, when I mentioned that to Mike, he had mentioned the turf and that, Sean Reardon's study had been completed, and he was going to go, I think this week, he was going to go over it with Sean. But it sounds like they're moving this thing forward, but again, I don't know.
They haven't been to the Board of Selectmen, though. I don't know.
Not public.
Yeah, right. Well, but
Yeah.
supposed to be public, but... All right, well, whatever. I mean, like I said,
Well, at some point, it's going to be public to the extent that the selectmen, the school department, somebody, I don't know who would have to give them authorization, or you guys authorization to do that, right, the maintenance?
Right, and again, this is just
it's a...
Right.
literally a thought that I put on the table on Thursday.
Yeah, right.
And it came about it halfway through the meeting, the bulb went off on my, and I said, wait a minute, why aren't we doing this privately?
Right.
And, because one thing that Alicia mentioned was that, to maintain fields, you need one person per 10 acres. And we have 60 acres of field to maintain, so we should have 6 employees to maintain 60 acres, but we have 2.
Right.
And so the fields just don't get the attention.
Well, the organizational study that the selectmen paid for Jim Clyde's department recommended park people to be added, and that so far has fallen on deaf ears. So, I mean, if the town can step up in another way, that would be absolutely wonderful.
The other nice thing, I think, about the idea of doing the grass for a while, is just, I'm still concerned about that crumb rubber stuff and how bad it's going to be. If you can even just give another year or two to see if the studies come out more, to find out for sure. Because, number one, the kids, I worry about the kids. But number two is, so we put it in, and I'm afraid we spent $1 million to put it in, and 2 years later, we have to spend $2 million to take it back out again, and resod, and it's just like, And I understand all the benefits of it, of being out there early in the spring, and I understand all that. It's a tough one. So if there were something, that we could even just, like I said, just for a year or two to see if we get some definitive studies on whether it's a problem or not. I feel a lot better about it, but anyway, so I applaud your efforts of going forward, and if you've seen it work elsewhere and you think that's doable in the town, that's a nice...
So it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
It's something that we're going to try to get, present something to, the town to
Yep.
say, hey, we can do this, and, we have some funds, lacrosse has funds available.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens, yeah.
Great. Okay, interesting, but you can still ask for us of...
I will.
Yeah,
Instead of running wind sprints, they can push lawnmowers.
there you go.
And cedars, and there you go.
Right, that cedar.
Yeah, that'd do it, huh?
I just have one other thing to give you an update on, and that was at last week's selectmen's meeting, the board did sit down with police, fire, and highway to go through their capital plan requests. So they did have a discussion with each department head regarding the items that I had recommended in the funding scenario that I gave you guys the week before. The board did agree to recommend that those funding scenarios be presented on the warrant. They voted to insert them into the warrant as recommended by the Board of
This is
Selectmen.
for police, fire, and
And
highway?
All of it?
Yes. As I cut their plans down, based on what we could afford. So not everybody got everything they wanted, obviously. But I did fund them to, whatever maximum I could within the dollars that were available.
That's the recommendations that she made on January 6th.
Yes.
Yep. There's only two slight changes. In the fire department one, the self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA item, there's $300,000 reserved for that. However, we did put in a grant application with FEMA. We won't know until the summer whether it's awarded or not. And what the selectmen did say, that if it is, then our cost would be reduced to just $15,000, freeing up $285,000. If that happens, they wanted to allocate that $285,000 towards the ladder truck, which is coming up in the following year, to save it and put it aside, rather than spend it on another capital item. And they also added the Castle in the Trees playground project item, which was requested at $100,000 in funding. The breakdown of that is, it's a total project cost of about $300,000 to do the tear down and replacement of that facility. We did receive $100,000 from the state. We're actually getting a wire shortly on that. About $100,000 has been donated between in-kind services. Cataldo has offered to do all of the tear down and site prep that's needed over there, and that's about $75,000 in services. And then the group, the Littleton Children's Fund, has fundraised and received $25,000 in donations. So this would be the town buying into a third of the project cost, with a third coming from private and a third from the state.
And the state came up with $100,000, right?
Yes, yep.
It's nice.
So that, those are the only changes. So I will have a
And
full
what
update.
about the school's capital? They had a pretty hefty list in there. Is that all funded or not?
No, I had, in the meeting from the 6th or whatever it was, funded to a certain point based
Yeah,
on their priority
The
order.
8th, yeah.
You want to give an update on where the school budget is?
We have not received the full Excel spreadsheets. We did receive PDF documents. I know you all got them too. Steve Venuti spent about a week going through them. God love
We
him.
did ask for Excel versions, and they didn't give them to us,
Yeah.
even after we asked, so.
He is meeting with Steve Mark tomorrow. What Steve Venuti did was created some pretty slick spreadsheets that'll do all of the personnel info tracking forward. It'll move people along the grid as they progress, in their education or their, step increases and everything for every unit. So not just the teachers, but the admins, the teaching assistants, every group. So he's built a pretty slick model. All we need to do is use it.
Populated.
He's populated
Reason why
it.
they gave it to us as a PDF versus an Excel file?
No, and I asked as well, no answer, just that it would be coming in the form that we wanted. And obviously, it existed in that form because they had to create it in the first place.
PDF,
Created some of those spreadsheets for them. Yep. That came back as PDF. So, I mean, he was familiar enough with the spreadsheets to be able to kind of pick through, but it took about a week of picking
It's
through
just
the
a
numbers.
waste of time.
That's a waste
It's
of
just a
time.
waste of Steve's effort, right, exactly.
So I'm hoping that tomorrow we'll have some more data on that. We are trying to get to just the level staffing dollar, because, that I committed to getting that for every department, whether it gets funded at that level or not. We think, based on our data, the level staffing number is $555,000. I have programmed in there $690,000 as an increase. So, I think that even at that, we're okay with what I have in there as a placeholder. I know that they're requesting the $1.2 million, so that, a lot of discussion's going to have to happen. But I think that the level staffing number is about $555,000. but we'll know more.
Okay. Thank you for all that. So the only other thing, I don't know if we want to talk about it or not, is, when we had the all-day meeting, I made note of all the headcount requests. So depending on how all the other money, budget numbers turn out, there may be some ability to actually add staffing. There's, in terms of the projected, this is not capital now, this is operating income, there's growth, there's enough growth that we may be able to do some of that. And I don't know if we want to talk about that and put our recommendations in, or just wait till Monday night and ask the selectmen, but I think that there's some discussion, the selectmen kind of view the things that are under their bailiwick, but then there's also, the town clerk, and there's other things that may be outside of that, and maybe we want to look at these and say, some of them are small, some of them are big, but if we say, well, we recommend, or we endorse this or not, or not.
Yeah, I think that the two that I recall, and I don't have the list in front of me, one was Diane requesting 4 or 5 hours to be open one night.
And so that's an additional, that's not just hours for her, it's additional service to the town.
Additional service. And then the other one was John wanting to be paid for 3 more hours
Right.
of what he
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
spends.
Right.
Right.
And then the planning board, I think, was looking for
A 10-hour clerk.
some clerk work. So, John sort of goes through the selectmen, but the other two are elected boards, so that they don't really have an ombudsman to stand up for them in the budget process. So,
So just to- yeah.
we could come forward and say, yeah, we think it's okay, what do you think, selectmen and school committee, or whatever, or not? I mean, whatever.
If we weren't meeting next Monday, I'd say, let's, hash it around.
Right.
But, I mean, I'd just as soon have that conversation with them.
That's
And,
fine.
and we can't wait forever, but I'd also always prefer to defer to their recommendation first, and then, and then act off of that. And I don't know what their intentions are, Bonnie, maybe you.
Well, I've got to do a budget update. I wanted to wait until I met with you guys before I prepped it. So
Right.
I'll make sure that information is in the budget
Yeah.
update for consideration, so that you'll be prompted to.
And just so people know here, besides those, and those were a couple of the minor ones, I mean, the highway department has asked for an engineer, 2 additional park people for the grounds, as you were talking about, plus upgrade their admin. The police and the fire department both had their administrative assistants upgraded in extra hours last year. The highway department did not. So that was in their request. The fire department, of course, looking for the paramedics, but that's kind of a whole different, because that's not really just additional staffing, that's a different program. Police asked for 2 officers plus a quarter of a reserve. Library was looking for 23 hours on existing staff, and it's not even extra more hours, it's just more staffing when they're open, better service. Town clerk, as you said, 5 hours to stay open. IT was looking for some extra hours, but that may get adjusted anyway because of the water department, what's going to go on there. So that may get addressed elsewhere anyhow. The planning board, 10 hours for clerical work. Elder and Human Services was looking for an extra outreach and a half a driver. So those are, there are a lot of things on the list. So, like I said, in some ways it's easier to say no to everybody, but, I mean, you've already heard me say it a couple of times. The other part of this is the town is growing and growth isn't free, and so to some extent you have to address some of these also, so you have to decide where you want to go, so.
I kind of agree with Paul. I'd like to hear what the selectmen have to say, and if they don't take a position on it, then we should review it and take a position on it.
When
I'll
you,
incorporate it into
yeah,
the-
when you prepare that financial data that you're going to give the selectmen,
Mm-hmm.
you always send that out to them the weekend before?
Yeah, we send it out Friday, so.
For us, would you send it electronically to us so that we'll have it the weekend before?
Yep, I'll send it out.
In what you just put up there, did you send that to us electronically
I
yet?
am going to.
Okay,
I
fine.
wanted to make sure that I didn't need to change anything, but
right.
I'll email it out.
So that we can see what all those items are also.
Yep.
And
Yeah, typically I do that, I send the budget updates to you and the school committee before, on Friday.
Just, I mean, you convey it to them either in writing or in verbally, that, as always, we like doing it in conjunction with them, but we'd kind of like to hear where they're coming from sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good.
They have a lot of things, I mean, we kind of focus on this stuff, and they have a
Yeah.
lot of things they need to
Right,
focus on, so sometimes it's easier for us to say, well, how come you're not thinking about that? Well,
Because I got a room full of irate people.
so,
But the budget scenario now, with your numbers in for the schools, has us where?
About 200,000
positive.
positive.
If we use their numbers,
Oh, wow.
we're 500 negative?
600, yeah,
600, 5 to 600 negative.
right.
So there's still, I mean, everybody gets mad when I say it, but
Yeah.
the schools are the gorilla.
Yeah,
They just are, and, they.
And we're
move a
gonna
little
get
bit,
their
everybody
numbers,
else-
they're not gonna give us our numbers, so.
Right, so you need to, that's the one that we need to, Mike has got to work with us on how do we close that gap. So, that's really what, and this is not an unusual scenario.
Probably good to invite them back in now that they have an official proposal on the table, just for conversation. Oh, that's true, they're Monday as well,
Monday
right,
night.
right, right,
Right.
fine, fine.
But it also makes it real clear, like I said, so you've got this on the table as well. So, it's not just yes or no to this group, it's
Right.
it's either or. And which is our job, but it's to look across the whole thing, and everybody needs to understand that. It's a balance act for everything. So, yeah.
That's a good point.
And, I mean, really, to me, our only oar of the water is the financial health of the town. And it's up to the school committee and the selectmen to be ombudsman for their groups. And mostly, we've been able to come to agreement over the years. A couple times we haven't, and we've gone toe-to-toe in town meeting. And as Paul will attest, that's not a fun
I don't think that'll happen.
for anybody.
I don't think that'll happen.
So I think it's in everybody's best interest, obviously, to go in lockstep. But if it really comes down to a Donnybrook, then so be it.
Yeah, but I think our first obligation is to prod them along so that we get the issue on the table, and hopefully we do come to a happy resolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely the best way to do it.
Part of the dance.
Right.
Kind of go through this stuff,
Right.
right? Some people love the game. I don't, but some people do.
As the gentleman on the other end of the table will attest, it's been worse. This is actually pretty good.
This ain't bad, let me
These
tell
are the good
you.
old days right now, all right?
These will be the good old days.
Enjoy it.
We are very, very fortunate, and it's not by luck. It's by a lot of hard work by a lot of people that were in this
Right.
position,
Just
so.
not screw up the future by.
No, I think I said it last year at the town meeting. It's, it's great to bring a balanced budget, but our primary thing is a long-term financial
Yeah.
health, but that's really key. So, okay. Anything else?
Minutes?
Want to speak? Huh? Alan, you were quiet tonight?
Good minutes?
Oh, minutes, thank you.
You just weren't listening to me.
Oh, okay.
Did you print that out?
Okay, so Marilyn sent out today the
CPC stuff.
amended minutes.
I wasn't here for that meeting, so I will not vote on that.
Anybody would like to make a comment or make a motion?
I make a motion, we accept the minutes of January 26,
I
2016.
think I missed that meeting too, so were you there?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the
I
four of you
second.
can vote on it, right, all right.
Okay. All's in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very
Two
much.
abstentions, you get that?
Okay,
Yeah, they didn't show up.
next.
So we're meeting Monday night with the
We're
selectmen.
meeting Monday night with the selectmen. Tuesday night is a policies and procedures meeting, but Monday night's a selectmen meeting joint, and no FinCom meeting next Tuesday then.
I've already passed that on to
Now,
Mark.
Betsy, did you think at all that maybe since we're scheduled the following week with, the FinCom we're not gonna be scheduled, right, the following week, the 9th?
The following day.
No, not the following
I'm
day.
just thinking, we were doing a good job, or about pairing up the policies and procedure and FinCom in the same night.
Right.
Now they're split,
That one they are.
yeah, okay.
That just happened because of the joint meeting.
I understand what
so
happened,
that's why.
yeah, all right, cool,
And then the other one was kind of open, available, so we said, okay, let's sneak one in.
okay.
All right, that's it. But you like the pairing better?
Oh, why not?
Yeah, sure, it's a one night, yeah, right.
So the next meeting is the 23rd, the next,
Well, the joint meeting,
no, just the plain FinCom is the 23rd, right? 2 weeks from tonight?
Yeah, I'll be,
That's 3 weeks from tonight,
which will put us back on schedule.
That's right, that's what I meant, the
Okay.
23rd.
yeah, we have the joint meeting Monday, we got
yes, I
the
don't know, is
policies
that it?
and
I have to look.
procedures, which...
I don't have my phone, so I don't have my calendar, so
So,
you guys tell
so
me.
I have the 9th.
Okay, so
We're not
this is
meeting
what we were
then.
just saying. So
So,
next week,
yeah,
no.
okay, good.
Next week we
Cancel.
meet Monday night, but not
Yeah,
Tuesday
the 8th,
night.
not the 9th.
Got it.
Right.
Got that, Greg?
And that's at 6:30, the selectmen meet, although we're on the agenda for
Start their
7:10.
meeting.
it was yesterday, I have no idea.
That's okay. It's
It's an
confusing.
afterthought, I guess.
But- And
You
you know
went
what?
last night, did you?
No, I
Oh,
missed,
okay.
I thought I missed it. I was like, oh, man, I missed it. I sent her a message. I'm like, I'm sorry, I missed the meeting last night. She's like, meeting.
I did too. Whoops.
Whoops.
All right, should we, let's, somebody want to make a motion here?
To adjourn?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second, third.
Favor? Okay, thank you. Good night.